What do you do if you don't feel like running games anymore? It's the middle of an epic campaign that you worked really hard on. The players have been enjoying it, and so have you. Until now. The date of the gathering arrives, and you dread running the game you had so much fun making and playing. What are you supposed to do? Let your players down by postponing the game or deliver a lackluster experience? It's a hard choice that we hope to help you work through if you're feeling burned out as a GM tonight on Playing God. I am your host, Nick Logie, and with me at the table is Xander Cheese Wizard Nolan.
Hey, man.
GM burnout is a real problem, one you might not even know you're experiencing until it's too late. The first thing we're going to cover is how to recognize when you're getting to your last straw. So let's start with that question. Xander, I know you've been burned out before, as have I. How can you tell when you're being burned out?
I can typically tell that I'm being burned out on a game when a couple of factors start to come into play. I lose the fun that comes from writing the session and preparing my notes and getting tokens and maps and everything kind of pulled together to prepare for the next week or 2 week or 1 month session or however long it is that you run your game. And the other way that I can tell, and it's a lot more subtle and it comes from experience, is that you can compare your notes from previous sessions, and you can tell when there is a drop in your performance as a game master. When your players are like, oh, okay, that game was fun. When 3 games previous, they were like, dude, that was so awesome. That moment was so cool, and like everybody's just hyped and they're ready for the next game. If you don't leave the table or the voice chat or however it is that you play your game, and your players aren't experiencing that when they used to, that's a sign. Like sometimes it's not even something that you do. Sometimes it's something that your players are telling you just subconsciously. So I use how my players react to my storytelling as a means by which to measure if I'm doing a good job and whether or not I'm starting to burn out, which happens a lot more than people think it does.
Well, let's start. Let's start. We've covered a lot already, even with just what your experiences are. But let's backtrack a bit and go to the note-taking aspect, because you say you'll feel it, but I think I might have a little more concrete explanation, because I know that's
Shoot.
happened to me. Because I do look at my notes, and one of the things that I know when I'm getting burned out is if I'm looking at my notes and I don't want to look at my notes, like I see them and I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't care, then
Oh yeah, that's a
this the
terrible
second
feeling.
that happens, that's a big warning sign. And then if you like scroll up, if you're using a single document, or if you're going to page 411 like Xander does with every book he writes, then
Yeah.
you'll you'll read the previous stuff and you're like, oh, that was a cool character that I came up with, and you'll start to recall like what your mindset was when you were writing all that, and then you can compare that mindset to what you're feeling currently, and
Yeah.
uh, if you're finding that you want to like bring the game back to its like glory days, instead of trying to bring it back, see why the glory days went away,
Yeah.
and then figure out how to not bring them back but build new ones.
hmm One of the worst things that you can do as a GM when you're starting to get to that burnout phase is prematurely hyping yourself back up. Now, uh,
Wait, what do you
I
mean
say
by
that
that? Are you talking about like for a specific game like you're about to run, like your game's in 3 days and you're psyching yourself up, or is this like right before, or what do you mean?
this is you're starting to feel burnout. You're recognizing it. You know, you've had enough experience as a GM, but we'll talk a little bit later about how to psych yourself up to get back into the saddle for your game. But there's a difference between doing it, you know, accurately and the way that you need to keep your game going, and then running yourself prematurely and convincing yourself that you can keep going even if you probably shouldn't, if you should take some time. And that
Yeah, one of
does
the
have a
biggest
tendency of
things,
happening.
one of the biggest problems that GM burnout causes is that the whole table feels it, because
hmm
there's a lack of, there's a drop in quality.
Oh
The
yeah.
it's very noticeable. Even if you're trying your hardest, like you'll know when you like pick up the die to roll like an attack, even an attack roll for like your NPCs, and you're just like, sure, and then you just let the die hit the table and you just let things fall as they may,
Yeah.
instead of like trying to craft a enthralling narrative. Then
Yeah.
you'll get that. So here's something that is a big tell for when I know I'm getting burned out,
Yeah.
and it's when you start to hate what the players do.
Oh,
that
that's a really good
that
one.
that's the best tell for me, because
Yeah.
if somebody's no matter who it is, it doesn't matter how long I've gamed with them, what kind of role player they are, if I'm sitting at the table, I'm running it, and people's awesome ideas for like how to solve problems or use magic in creative ways just starts to irritate me, then
Yeah.
that's when I know I need to step back, because
Yeah.
if I'm getting pissed off at the players for I don't know, playing the game, then maybe we should stop playing for a minute.
Yeah. I had a campaign that I was running with one of our listeners actually, and I was getting increasingly more agitated with the way the game was being played, and I just started the campaign. I was really psyched about it, really hyped about it. But the problem that I came to was I had just ended a year and a half long campaign that had just seen its end, and I wanted to move on to something new, and I didn't recognize that I should take a break from GMing completely and just play some games and just relax for a while before jumping directly back in to another campaign. And when you do something like that, the burnout happens way faster. And I was noticing that I was getting more and more aggravated with the way the game was being played, and I just decided to just table the game, be like, "Hey, look, guys, I hate to say this, uh, I'm kind of done. I really need to take some time to just sort some things out." And thankfully, I recognized it before it hurt any friendships or upset anybody. But I can definitely feel it, and I know that you can. I know that Jesse has before too. He's expressed those concerns to me as well.
And it could be possible that it might not be you explicitly feeling burnout. Maybe the whole table is. Maybe everybody should take like a
Oh
month
yeah,
off. Maybe instead of gaming on your normal night, since you spend multiple hours in characters speaking as who you are and like not as yourself, like your out of place self, then maybe you just need to use those hours to just hang out, like go to a restaurant or like go somewhere else, whatever your hobbies are that don't have to do with tabletop gaming. Maybe
yeah,
you could find a common ground with a player that you didn't even know that you had. Maybe you're super into World of Warcraft and nobody at your table was, but then you realize that when you took a break and you were on and one of your players was like, "Hey, I play that." And you're like, "Oh shit, I didn't know that."
Oh, I didn't know that.
And then you end up playing
Yeah,
that together.
yeah. One of the one of the means by which to kind of deal with burnout, because burnout isn't a GM exclusive thing. I know we're talking about it as a GM exclusive thing now, but you'll start to see how your players go. But if you
We
need to
are
take a break
focusing on it as a GM
as a
aspect,
GM
not just
aspect,
because this is playing God, but also because when the GM isn't having fun, and you all know my philosophy, where the GM is a player too. If the GM
hmm
isn't having fun, though, it's very obvious to everyone because
oh
that
yeah,
usually ripples out, and then nobody's having fun.
yeah. But one of the things that you can do to sort of combat that, uh, if you need to take a break, but you don't want to lose that contact with players, because sometimes that happens, you can just have one of them run a game, or just get together for like game nights.
That's
You know,
true. A one shot, change it up on who the DM is.
oh yeah,
Some people generally don't like DMing, so you shouldn't really force that on them. But some people, like me and maybe Xander, I don't know, prefer to do the GMing. So I'd pretty much rather always be God than a player. But obviously, there's some exceptions.
yeah. I'm a perfect 50-50. I enjoy playing a good game. But I've also noticed that as a game master and as someone that puts a lot of work and a lot of time into the structure by which I create a narrative that I am also exceptionally critical of other GMs. Uh, and I've noticed that if I allow another GM to kind of have the spotlight and start a game, that refreshes some of my anxieties about my own GMing, and it helps me see some of the flaws that maybe I can work on. And so, even though I have that apprehensiveness about, being critical of another game master, I sort of push that back into the back burner, and I do my best to try and learn what I can from the other GMs that I play with. And that's been also a useful tool. So if you're experiencing burnout, that is a fantastic way to sort of get yourself back into the mode of it, create some new ideas, some fresh narratives, and also give yourself a break from having to create so much, because you've got to create a lot,
Oh yeah,
which,
we'll get back into the more specifics on kind of resolving the burnout a little later on.
mhm,
But for now, let's go over what actually causes the burnout, because we figured out how to identify it. At least
yeah.
on our level, everybody's different, so figure out what
Oh
works
yeah.
best for you in order to determine if you even have burnout. But now let's
Yeah.
talk about the actual factors that are involved in that. One of the critical things that I noticed when I got burned out recently was it was because I was trying to run a game that didn't jive with how I told stories.
Yeah.
One of the big things is the consider the actual tools that you're using to run the game. With us, we use like Roll20 and Discord and some other shit. But on Roll20, one of the things that I hate, I've said this from day one, I don't like
You hate.
using grids and tokens. But since we used Roll20, I made big ass elaborate maps like with multi levels and some crazy set pieces and everything like that, which look awesome and they were fun to play in when we got around to it. But getting there, like the idea of sitting down and making a map for something that I didn't really want to do to begin with, just that was a big defining factor.
Where on the other hand, I very much enjoy using grids and tokens and stuff like that, and that's one of the things that I really enjoy doing. And uh, Nick says that a DM should also be a player, and I think that a DM should absolutely be a player. But one of the best things about being a GM and playing God and moving the narrative along is that you also get to build the world. Because I'm definitely a world builder, and so creating maps and NPCs to stick in them, it's a really fulfilling experience for me. But like Nick says, do what you can for your games. Don't let us
Well,
dictate
Xander,
that.
I actually love doing that too. I love world building. That's one of my favorite things to do. I like creating like the actual geographical maps, not the specific. This is a five
Oh
foot
yeah.
square map, but I like creating the big maps. I like having histories, filling it with cool people and like things that happen in cultural experiences and shit like that. And that's super fun for me. It's just when I
Oh
get
yeah.
down to the why do I have to measure like 40 feet on this thing for a map that's probably not even going to be used more than like these 5 squares here, because once you get set into combat, you're not going to really be moving that much. Then that's where I was kind of like, what's the point?
Yeah, and I can totally empathize with that. You put a lot of work into those things, and it looks cool, but it gets used for maybe an hour out of one game session, and then you've got to trash it because if all of your maps look the same, then your players are like, I've been here before, and so it takes away of some of the suspension of disbelief. So you've got to work harder, and it does get to be a pain, but I enjoy doing that part. I like the minuscule, tiny details, like putting in the wine rack to explain why this guy is carrying around a bottle of wine. He likes wine, and there's a wine rack in his place where he goes in to grab a bottle before he heads back out into the main cellar area. And I like doing those
Not
things,
not to
the minor
derail you
details.
from you too much from that, but like yeah, I do all that too. It's just in descriptions instead of what shows up on the map.
Exactly. I like to let pictures do some descripting for me because in the past I've had I've had people tell me that I spend so much time doing so much describing that I was compared to a popular horror writer that it actually became a term that was used to
Hold
describe
on.
my GMing style.
I'm gonna guess that. Hold on. Let me guess. It's Stephen King.
You're absolutely right.
Yes.
I would I would go down into the texture on the leaves and shit. And it's like, you're Stephen Kinging again, Xander. And I'm like, sorry.
That motherfucker writes like 1,000 pages for a story that's only 200.
Yeah, they call it Stephen Kinging in my little circle here. But I enjoy doing that kind of stuff.
So what? So
Uh,
when it comes to the actual like game that's causing you burnout, that's one thing. You kind of have to identify where exactly it's going wrong. Whether it's like the tools you're
yeah,
using, whether it might be a particular person or set of people at your table that they. It's not like they're like playing the game wrong or whatever, but
yeah,
they definitely should have, like, the game you're trying to run doesn't match up with the game they're trying to play or with the other
yeah,
people at the table and all that, which really should be taken care of before you start the game, but sometimes that can't happen, obviously. Um,
yeah.
but there's another big thing that's constantly causing burnout, and that's called real life.
Oh yes. Real life can get in the way. In fact, many a campaign that myself, I know Nick, I know Jesse, every GM friend that I've ever had has always said, "Man, I had this great idea for a campaign, and we got together for the first session. Everybody was jiving for it, and we were great. We created characters, and then we went for the second game. It was great, and then on the third game, this dude had a doctor's appointment, so he couldn't make it, and then on the fourth game." And it just continues to
Oh no, the
exacerbate from
Dark
there.
Ages are
So
back.
the Dark Ages are back, man. There was no tabletop games for like 3 years during the Dark Ages.
Well, unless
It
it
was
was like
awful.
one game or two games at most, and then you'd have to
Yeah.
make another character, and people got so fucking sick of that. They got burned out from
Uh,
Burnout.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But real life, absolutely.
So let's use a real life example, a real life example.
Okay.
Whatever. Latier. We took, what was it? It was like, what? It's like two
It's
or
been.
3 months, right?
It
Before
was
we
like
started back
four
up. It's
months.
like 4 months,
It was 4 months.
and there was. I'm not gonna talk about the specifics of this because it does involve other people, but in general, everything was going bad for everyone.
Yeah.
Personally, I had a few deaths in my family,
Yeah.
which was it was a horrific time, obviously.
Yeah.
And then other people had their own stuff going on. But basically, the emotional toll of what was happening mixed with the obligations that you had to take care of because
Yeah.
non-gaming obligations are obviously more important.
Oh,
Then,
absolutely.
then Monday would come up, and we'd be like, "Shit,
We've
we
got
don't have
nothing.
time for this. Like
No.
we have stuff to do. We need at the very least we just need to take a break.
Yeah.
Just chill out. Everyone's like on edge, and we should probably just step away from the game for a while, which is what we did.
Yeah, which is a really good call. It was a good place for everybody to kind of deal with some of the things that they were having. Like, I know one of our players had to go out of state to help take care of a family member. One of our other players, he's got issues at home. I've had issues at home. Like, real life will get in the way, and it's okay to take a break for however long it takes. Like, don't feel discouraged when you start up a campaign. You've put so many hours and you put a year or two into the narrative and telling the story, and your players are very invested. If real life starts to get to be a problem, take a 3, 4, 5, 6 month hiatus and just keep your players updated and try to stay in communication as best you can and support each other,
And
because
try to
when
find
you're
a date that everyone can definitively meet back up on. Because
yes.
if you could decide on one of those, that gets the ball rolling again. Once everybody's taking care of what they need to take care of, and
Oh,
then
absolutely.
the game will naturally just pick back up afterwards.
Yeah. Now, one of the other things that people tend to shy away from this topic. I don't personally, because I feel like as a gaming community and as a nerd community, this is something that's very prevalent within our community specifically. I don't know other communities because I'm not in them,
Lay it on me,
but
Xander. Lay it on
mental
us.
mental health is very, very important and can cause and exacerbate, gaming issues. If you're taking care of you and say you come with seasonal depression, or you have an actual depressing period in your life, then taking care of that is absolutely important.
I
And
want to put a disclaimer up here that we are not psychologists. Well, actually, Xander, you are, aren't you?
no, I am not actually a psychologist. I
Oh,
just
okay.
have a lot of classes under my belt.
Okay, I just wanted to be sure. So,
No.
yeah, just as part of this, like, there is a huge titanic difference between just burnout and an actual, like, real problem like depression or
Yes.
other mental health issues. If you think you're feeling something along those lines, or if that might be what's causing the burnout,
Go
then
seek help.
yeah, you need to want to talk to a professional.
You need to go and talk to a professional and deal with that. And none of your players are going to fault you for it. And if one of your players is having the same kind of issue, then it might be time to take a break for them as well. Because as a GM, your most important resource is your players. They're the ones that paint your story for you. They're the ones that are walking through the world that you've created. And if they're not up to par, and they're not feeling well, give them the space and the time and the support as their friend, but don't put that on them to try and get better for the sake of the game, because that's only going to drive a wedge further between the GM and then the players, and ultimately not only killing the campaign, but that could also end some friendships. So take care of your mental health. It's very important. It's just like going to see a doctor for a regular checkup to make sure all your bits and pieces are working. Your lungs are fine, your heart is fine, your brain needs to be fine too. And
And
I
you,
know that a lot of people deal with issues like that on the regular basis. And if you can function well enough to play a game, that's perfectly okay. Just try and keep it managed. But if you're having a really heavy downhill, tell your GM, or if you're the GM, tell your players. Be honest and open with them, and that can help sort of give you the time that you need, and no one is going to feel like you've betrayed them or anything. So don't be afraid to be open and honest with your players. You do it for everything else, do it for this too. It's really important.
and as fun as tabletop gaming is, then once you start sacrificing more than you should sacrifice in order to play a game, then that starts also sacrificing the fun. So you really just shouldn't
Oh,
bother with it at
absolutely.
all.
Yeah. Another thing that can exacerbate burnout that's a little on the funner side is life does get in the way. We've talked a lot about things that could go wrong, and bad feelings and
Wait, are we
tumultuous
about to talk about
events,
what's going to go right?
but things that go
We getting
well. say
positive? Yeah.
say say you meet a girl, or if you're a girl you meet a guy, and you guys get into a relationship and you're going to get married, and you need to take 2, 3, 4 weeks for your honeymoon, or you want to go on vacation with your family, or you just got a new job and you're really excited, and life is starting to go in good ways. That is still stress, and that is still something that you need to take care of. And so putting a hiatus on your game for good things is also sometimes necessary. Taking the time to live life to its fullest and experience the good things that can come out of life, and dealing with the bad, can inevitably sometimes throw a wrench into your hobbies. And just like every other hobby in the world, even if you're, say I'm a hobbyist blacksmith now, uh, that you know I have to put that on hold if I'm going to take a vacation. It's the same thing with D&D. You need to try and run with the good as much as you can, and don't feel like you have to be pressured to, oh, well, hun, I would totally go on a vacation to Tijuana with you, or, I really want to go to Cancun for spring break for a week and a half, but I've got 2 D&D games that I've got to run, and I don't want to disappoint my player. No, totally tell them, hey guys, I'm taking a vacation. It's going to be fun. I'll send you guys pictures. We're going to postpone game for this date. Totally feel okay with doing that too. Like, don't feel pressured to be a GM either, and sacrifice good things in your life.
Exactly. So let's talk about the break itself. So you're like, okay, let's all step back from the table. Let's take some amount of time. What we're going to talk
Yep.
about is how long should you take, which is dependent on what exactly is going on,
Absolutely.
and maybe what specifically should you do during that break. We brought it up earlier. It's like first let somebody else run a game. Preferably, at least from my personal experience, don't use the same setting that you are currently playing in. You want to
No, don't do that.
if
Try
somebody
another system if you can.
yeah, if you want to, if you're doing a one shot or like a mini campaign or whatever, try a different system or
Oh
a
yeah.
different setting at the bare minimum.
Yeah.
Even if it isn't like a full on new setting, like that time when Xander you ran that Shadowrun mini campaign that was only 5 or 6 episodes long,
Oh
and
yeah.
even though that was using the Shadowrun universe that I kind of butchered, then
Dude, it was awesome. You didn't butcher. It was
oh
amazing.
no, I did butcher it, but in a good way. Butchers cut the meat so you could eat the steak.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. You did butcher it, but
Except
great.
this time, I didn't realize that Seattle was on the coast and other factors that were majorly important if I looked at just a map.
It's like, oh, you're traveling down a river. Are there rivers in Seattle? Okay, we must be on the ocean, I
Turns out there's
guess.
a
That's how this
fuckload
works.
of rivers in Seattle.
It turns out there's a lot. So, yeah, no, totally. When you go to take a break, there's a couple of things that you should look for. At least this is from my personal experience. I know that you have differing viewpoints on this. Um, when you go to take a break, the first thing that you need to do is you need to be upfront with your players about the reason for the break and about how long you expect the break to be.
For me
Judging
personally,
that,
when this happened, I actually used just our Facebook group where I post all of our news and everything, so that way I don't have
yeah,
to like try to directly get in contact with everybody at the same time, and they can kind of read it as they come across it. So
yeah,
if you use a tool like that, then that's a good idea.
totally do that. If you can use Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, whatever, totally use a means by which to communicate with your players in mass. It saves you some time. It saves you the heartache of trying to call everybody or text everybody. It's like, hey man, how's it going? Hey man, how's it going? Hey man, how's it going? Like
You also get to actually, when you type everything out, you can look at it and make sure it looks right instead of just winging it on the fly while you're talking to somebody. So that way you get
yeah.
everybody the same information, same consistency, all
Mhm.
that, same expectations.
So if it's for a thing that you have a finite amount of time, uh, the way I've always prepared it is the time that I need plus a week. And the reason why the plus a week is important is because you need to get back into headspace as a GM. So let's say you take vacation for a month in Mexico. For the first 2 days you get back, you're going to be kind of slugging back into the grind, but still excited that you went to Mexico. This is awesome. You just had an awesome vacation, and you need some time to kind of get back into the swing of normal things, just like a job. Like if you're going to take time off, try and get a little bit of time when you first get back, so where you can acclimate to the fact that you're back in real life again and not in a fantasy island in the middle of Mexico having fun. But taking that time to also have some time to prepare something so that you don't feel like you have to while you're on your vacation. For things that don't have a set amount of time, like for example, dealing with a death in the family or a major mental health crisis, or you lost your job, you don't know where you're going to get another one. Major life issues that you don't have a finite kind of set time frame. Agree on a checkup in X amount of time. Say, hey guys, I need to take a break because of this. I don't know how long dealing with this is going to take. So
Let's see
we
if we
should
could do
all
this
check
game
back up.
on this date and see if
Exactly.
everybody's good to go with that, and then people can just basically put in their input. Maybe they're not ready to come back to the game.
Yeah,
Maybe they got something going on in their life that they need a little more time on, or
like me,
yeah, or
for
maybe it
example.
does get close to the date, and you're like, oh, dude, I just don't have anything prepped. I have like a few notes, but this isn't gonna be good.
Yeah,
So
no.
maybe do give yourself an extra week, or however frequently you actually play the game.
Yeah, but when looking at that time frame, don't feel pressured that you have to start back up, but definitely give a solid date on a game day that people have already agreed are good days for them, so that under ideal circumstances on this date you can start again. But if things haven't quite gotten back into the swing, then you can postpone it, but make sure to put another solid date. And what the solid date does is it prevents the game from completely failing. And that complete failure, if you say, I need to take 6 months to deal with some crap, I'll talk to you guys in 6 months. 6 months rolls by, you contact everybody. Oh man, I completely forgot. There's nothing to put on the calendar. There's no reminders they can set. And if you have a solid date, you have a I know this is going to happen here. And then if you know that you're good to do it, back it up a week to give your players enough time to also get back into it and be like, okay, so it's been some time, but next Monday is Legends of Latier. We're going to get back into it and give them some time to get hyped back up and review their character sheets and go over like any levels that have been recent so they can refresh themselves. And those are also really good things to cover when we talk about how to psych yourself up. But
Well, so
yeah,
with if you take an extended break, let's say it's a few weeks, maybe a couple months, maybe the whole half a year, like your example has been.
yeah,
If when you're about to come back to that game, and you're talking to your players, and you have a date already, and everybody's good with that, and then it's that date comes, and it turns out that like the next week when you normally would have your game again would be nobody can make that one. It's best to actually just push that back further to when
oh
everybody
yeah,
can consistently start doing it again, because that's the big factor.
yeah,
If you
that's a
do
big
like a
factor.
game here and there, that's not gonna get it set in stone again.
Your
That's just
campaign will die faster than everybody in a Jason movie.
so about an hour and a half.
Yeah, give or take.
Okay, yeah, that's about right.
Yeah, it was recently Halloween. Damn it, I'm still in the spring of
Ooh,
horror flicks.
I love Halloween. I'll celebrate it until I don't know, probably next week.
I have and several of my friends have been wearing like skeletal stuff in protest to the fact that Christmas is already being thrown up on the shelves and it's freaking just barely November. What the hell happened to celebrating Thanksgiving, huh? What the hell?
Santa ate the turkey.
Of course he did. Um, and when you're coming to the conclusion about how long, try to be realistic. Talk to your players, talk to the people around you that aren't in the game, because that's something else that's really important. If you're going through a good time or a tough time in your life and you set a date to start your game back up, but that's not good for anybody else other than you and your players, that might exacerbate more problems as well. So, talk to your family, your friends, your wife, your kids, like whomever is in your life, in your regular day when you're not being a GM, and make sure that they're okay and that they understand that this is about to start up so that they can get back in the swing of it too. Because being a GM isn't just a job for you. If, let's say, you are married and your wife isn't one of the players, she's going to have to know that for 4 to 6 hours this Monday coming up, you're not going to be available during these times because you're running a game online or you're going to be out of the house or what have you. She's got to know that too. So talk
Or,
to the
or,
people that
or
are around you.
instead of being blindsided by the 5 people who show up at your house where you're going to run the game,
Oh
yeah,
yeah, that would also be a
a
very
knock at
bad
the door
situation.
comes up, and and she's like, "Who's this?" And then there are just a bunch of people holding pizza and dice, and one guy's got a 2 liter of Coke.
It's like, oh hey guys, I haven't seen you guys in like 6 months, bro.
And
What
then
are you doing
yep,
here?
they push right past her. Excuse me, I need the game. And then they sit down and ignore everybody else for like
Yeah.
4 hours.
So, talk to the people around you. If you gotta talk, like, if you're taking this break and you normally would have Mondays off, and suddenly you don't for an extended period of time, and you're talking to your boss, and it's like, yeah, no, I can come back to Monday, to work on Mondays. Let your boss know that your game's coming back up too, so he can give you those Mondays off, or she. I don't care. Your boss can be whoever.
You don't
At any
care?
rate,
You don't care about their bosses?
I don't care about what gender and or identifier they are. I just care that they have employment, because money is a good thing to have, and it makes our world go round, much as we hate it. Sometimes we love it. Anyway,
That's not what this
uh,
podcast is about. We ain't talking about capitalism up in here. No, 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 no.
but totally let the people around you know what's going on. And if you're experiencing GM burnout, that can affect your real life too. Like if you're
Well, yeah, if you're
upset
frustrated
about your
at a
game,
fantasy world like that
yeah,
involves imagination, then that's probably not going to reflect well in the real world that has actual consequences and much harder situations to deal with.
yeah. So talk to the people that are close to you in your real life too, because they might be able to help you through GM burnout, and not even you wouldn't even know it, because you're like, oh well, this is they like to play Fortnite, I like to play D&D, we kind of don't cross the streams. That was three nerdy references all at once. But they need to know too. The people in your life that are there all the time, and your friends and your family, they need to be aware that things are happening. So be sure not to alienate the people around you as well, which I unfortunately did over this last hiatus, and has left me feeling a lackluster. But we're back in the swing of things, and I've talked it out.
That's right, because
Anyway,
we got psyched up. So here's how to do that when your break comes to an end. You're chill, you want to get back in the game, and you pull up your shit, and what you're going to want to do the first thing is just kind of read through it generally.
oh yeah,
I don't write all of my shit down. I just make kind of like brief notes. But get yourself back in the mindset of, yeah, this is my world. This is what the story is. This is what the players are doing. This is who the characters are. This is who is maybe somebody I've forgotten about, like an NPC that was in the background for a while. Reacclimate yourself with those familiar faces, and then from that point you can kind of move back into the content creation section
oh
of
yeah,
everything, where you can start coming up with new NPCs, characters, what have you, new scenarios, new encounters, new fights.
oh yeah.
And once you start like feeling the fire, and like you sit down at a keyboard, you look at your notes and you're like, I want to add something to that, then your burnout's pretty much come to an end
Your
once you're
burnout's
ready to
done.
do it. But you got to still make sure that once that game date arrives, that you are prepared, and that you have prepared your
Absolutely.
players, that you're going to fucking go back in there hard, and you're going to play the
Come out
fuck out of
swinging.
some D&D.
Now, something that I've picked up over time as a means by which to test whether your burnout is over so that you can get hype about it is to make a character in the system at a random d20 dice roll level, but make it a complicated build, like a wizard or something that you got to go through and read and pick spells, and make this a realistic NPC for your game. And if you get really excited about, you're going through the spell list, you're like, oh, that'd be fun, your burnout's over. But if you're like, ugh, fuck, just level 1 prestidigitation, fireball for whatever, and like, then your burnout might not be over. And character creation is something that as a GM you do constantly. So even if you don't feel hype about it, you've got a basic concept all ready to go when you do start to feel hype. So nothing is lost, but you'll know if your burnout is over. And
Eh,
if you don't feel hype, don't start back up.
That's right. And a real quick
Don't do
side
it.
note, if it's getting to the end of like a several month hiatus and you're still feeling burned out, that's actually probably not burnout anymore. That's probably something more serious that's going on under the hood. that you should probably take a look at.
Yeah, that works really well for like 2, 3, even like a month, maybe 2. But anything further than that, you've lost your mojo, sort of. So anything more than a 2-month hiatus, there's a lot more work that comes into getting back into the saddle and getting ready to ride again.
Right, but
So
you've
yeah,
hopped into the saddle, this metaphorical saddle, and you're pretty pumped to get your game back up again. Part of what you need to be doing as a game master is making sure your players are equally pumped. What this means, this means a lot actually, but one of the key things is whatever you had planned for the return game, if even if it's just the continuation of whatever the storyline is, make sure you revamp that and like refine it so that way it's an epic like kick back off into the game. You don't want to you don't want to start a game like in a low key tavern or anything like that. But if
no,
you're in the
no,
middle of a campaign and you just finished like a big boss or whatever, introduce the new villain in a real bombastic way. Have them burn down a town. Just something big kind of needs to happen,
yeah,
which really
crazy.
pulls everyone back in. It like gives them good motivation for getting back into character, since it's instant role play if something huge happens, and then since you put it on yourself to narrate such a big happening, then that opens your mind to having NPCs flow more easily into the setting or the scene, I mean, and basically allows you to follow the flow of the narrative a little better if it's not like a hard-coded thing and it's more like we're continuing the campaign where we left off, but we need to make it awesomer. That's Xander, that's pretty much what I was trying to do when we started Latier back up. Because
dude, it worked. That was awesome. And it came perfectly as a Halloween episode too. It was perfect.
Well, the first one wasn't the Halloween episode, but I guess they had a little bit of spook to it. I'm talking about the River of Time.
The River of Time. Yeah, that was intense. Like, that was crazy. That's a really good idea. I think I actually might steal that for future reference. It's really good. I liked it.
But that basically, without getting into the whole nitty gritty, I gave each character their own special thing that they could only could resolve. So that way, if you have this kind of applies for tables that aren't mine, but if you have a player that really likes kind of like hogging the limelight or always taking the spotlight or something like that, this gives every character a definitive chance to just really act out what they're doing, where your problem's not going to be solved by the wizard who can cast magic. It's going to be solved by the negotiative barbarian who is trying to settle a dispute with words rather than explosions.
Oh yeah, or a giant great sword of murder. And that segues very, very nicely into, you want to bring your game back up. You want to put it back up. You feel your GM burnout is done. And here comes the pivotal question. This is the moment where you as a GM have to make a call based on not just you, but also your players. And that's, do you keep the game alive and keep pushing it and keep, trying to tell that narrative? Or do you cancel the game indefinitely to give your players some more time to get back into it? And hold
on there, Chief. When I said indefinitely, that means just cancel the game. Like, you will not be returning to it. Period.
Oh goodness!
Like that's why that's why I saved this for near the end, because that is kind of a big topic. It's a big decision too, because like you said, you're affecting not only yourself but the other players.
Oh yeah.
And the reason I wanted to go through everything else first is because some of the examples can apply to if you need to cancel your game. So if you've played a game for like 5 sessions, and even if they've been fun sessions or not, it doesn't really matter. But then you have to take like a 3-month break after only 5 sessions. It might be worth it to consider even if you just reuse the setting, to drop the characters, like whatever happened in the storyline, just nope, axed, and like basically just say we are done with this game. We're when we pick back up, we either use another system or a different set of characters or a different everything.
Yeah.
But there is a point in time when you seriously need to question: do I continue running this game at all?
Yeah. And the means by which you measure that is once you feel like your GM burnout is over, or your life troubles have ceased to become such an issue, and you feel like you can get back into it. Sit down and on a call if you can, or in person if that's how you do things. And
Let's just
talk with
assume
them
everyone's
about it.
together for the purposes of this in some way or the other.
Yeah. Keeping the game alive, in my opinion, has to have a unanimous yes, and not a unanimous yeah, okay. No, a
Yeah,
unanimous
it's
fuck
not
yeah.
it's not fine or okay. It's let's do it. Hell
Yeah.
yeah. Additional expletives here.
Yes, everybody is just as hype about getting back into it as you are. If one of your players is not, you can consider giving them the bow out from the game and giving them an epic end of game kind of explanation and continuing on without that player, or cancel the game entirely, try to move to something as different as you can, because that player could be experiencing burnout continually, not because of the game per se or the playing of it, but from the setting. Because
I
even a setting,
generally, yeah, I generally, if this did happen, switch systems because usually
yes,
a new system comes with a new setting. A lot of times, in pretty much all of them actually, the
yeah,
setting is there for you to use. Even D&D has an official setting, even if nobody uses it. I know a lot of people
I've
do, but I mean, I've
I
played the Forgotten Realms before, but not much.
I don't think I've ever used an official setting for any role playing game I've ever played in ever. I don't.
You played the World of Darkness games with
Oh
me
yeah, yeah,
and the
yeah.
cam.
Okay,
So
yeah, Camarilla, that's official stuff.
yeah, that's because we didn't get a choice.
Yeah, it's you play this game or you don't. But I live here, then play. Fine.
That's pretty much why I played in so many of those games because I lived in the house.
Yeah, did
But
so.
that's a tale for another time. But if you're even asking yourself the question of whether or not you should cancel it, then you need to give that some serious consideration. Uh, let
Absolutely.
All right, Xander. Let me tell you about how I almost indefinitely canceled Latier.
No, that would have been awful.
It would have been, and I gave it a lot of consideration. In fact, one of those 4 months was basically just me sitting around wondering if I even wanted to start it again. And there were a lot of those days where I was sitting there and thinking, I don't think I do. And the only reason it did manage to continue is because enough time had passed and all that shit had finally started to wind down that and honestly, since we aren't too terribly far from the end, that was a big factor. If you had like an entire, I don't know, like 20 plus sessions or something, then I probably
Yeah,
would have just said, no, I'm sorry guys, but it's already been 4 months and I don't think I can get back into this.
yeah,
And that would have been sad. But if that's what needs to
yeah,
happen, that's what needs to happen. Luckily for us, it didn't need to happen, and
yeah,
we launched back into the game. Um,
yeah. And that makes me sad in a completely different way, because we've been playing Latier for so long that it's going to be sad to see it go.
mhm.
For I am a game one player. In fact, I am the only remaining game one player uh from the beginning of Latier, and it'll be satisfying to see the game go, but I recognize that the game is also coming to an end, so I
Well, it
kind
has
of figured
to.
that you would jump back into it, but I wasn't sure for a while there.
So one of the things that also was a big contributing factor for putting it like restarting the game was that I felt invested in the story again when I started looking at my notes and I started looking at the bullshit that I wrote down, and was thinking, man, this is pretty cool, isn't it? And
It is definitely really cool.
and then I got to Yazrak the Red's stupid long name, and then I was like, I can't not just let this guy hang out
Oh
here.
man. Damn it. I had it pulled up earlier too because I was telling somebody the name and I
We
was like,
we
"Oh,
have
I'm going to have
limited
this for the
time on the
podcast."
podcast. We don't have enough time to speak his name.
Yazrak the Red
We don't
or
need to inundate everybody with that crazy ass name,
or Yazrak RT dot dot dot
etc., etc.,
etc.
etc.
So on and so forth.
Once the game fires back up again, whether or not it is due to burnout or on your end or player end or whatever, then when that first game finishes, when you've given it your all, the return game, and at the end of it, everybody's really excited, including you, for the next game.
Oh yeah.
Like if either A, everybody's already talking about it, or you're already thinking of like, what am I going to do next? That's a great sign, which means that you should keep going with it.
Absolutely. You should keep it keep it alive. And
Conversely, if you get to the end of the game and everyone kind of like mumbles like, yeah, that was fun, or you're like, yeah, that was a pretty good time, then maybe that's where you should call it, instead of forcing yourself and everybody else to kind of like show up for work.
yeah.
You need to come at it like a game, a hobby, a fun thing that you do with your friends, however many times you do it a month.
Yeah. If it starts to feel like work, then GM burnout is probably a thing you're beginning to experience, and that's a good means by which to measure it too. Because it's
Indeed.
work, but it shouldn't feel that way. And if it does, that's not good. You should have fun. That's the
That's why my
point.
philosophy is always the GM is a player too. Because if the GM is the guy who like just makes stuff, then that's design work. And
Yeah.
that's not what we're here at the table for. We're here for fun, epic adventure, and great story.
Oh yes. So get out there, have some fun. If you're experiencing burnout, take it seriously. Take the time to really deal with the issues around you. And if you can jump back into it, totally do so. But remember that this is a pastime that you're supposed to enjoy. And the moment you stop enjoying it, there's a problem. And you should really look at what those problems are and try to address them to the best of your abilities. And the same thing goes true for your players. You know, take the temperature every once in a while, see how everybody's doing. If everybody's having fun, it's all great, and it's like, no, dude, that was great. You're probably fine. But if they're like, it was okay, like, there was a cool moment or two, then talk to that player, drag them aside, because they might be experiencing player burnout. So, as a GM, it's your responsibility to maintain a good story and a good narrative, but it's also your responsibility to maintain a good life and a good means by which to be a good GM and a good friend to your players, because that's your job number one, is being a good friend to those people that you play games with and that you enjoy this hobby with. Because the moment you start to resent someone, that resentment will breed and it will only get worse. So take the temperature, take your time, have fun with it, and don't let it become work.
Well, role players, that's our show. We hope you had as much fun listening as we had making this episode, and we'll see you next time on Playing God. See ya.
Later, man.